and move to item 10C. This is the Midwinter Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agency Conference Report. Secretary Wasley and Commissioners McNinch and Wallace, informational. The report will be provided on the recent Midwinter Conference held in San Diego, California. Whoever would like to start?
Okay, looks like I'll get us rolling here. You know, at these, I like to kind of give a quick overview on how these things are set up. So the the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies is an association of with members, in basically every state west of the Mississippi and 5 provinces. Is that right? Are part of the are members of the association. There's a number of committees. There's a lot of business that's done at those on a broad level. You hear about some of those things occasionally here. Most everything that the department does has some connection to WAFWA and efforts that are being made at WAFWA on a much broader scale. So from DC to things on the ground, some of the guidelines that we've heard and talked about from the with regards to managing or handling wildlife conflicts or deer, bears, a lot of that stuff is founded in the association. So they have a committee that's 4 commissioners. The directors, it's their way of allowing the opportunity to have the commissioners come and as commissioners we're guests at the conference, and it provides a forum for us to talk about what's going on in our respective states, and there's opportunities to express those thoughts and get an idea of how other states are handling things. So I try to keep it at a little broader level. There were a couple of real interesting things just at the biology level that I did note. One of those had to do, and Tony, I'm going to ask you to help me if I go astray here, but the BLM did receive full funding request for sage grouse work for this next year, and it was $45 million more than FY15. That's significant. I think it speaks to the effort that's out there regarding sage grouse and what's going on. And I think that the take home is that we've got a real strong effort that's headed down the tracks with sage grouse. It kind of highlights the importance of. Not able to hear. Okay, sorry. So it really speaks to staying on track with the plans that are in place and being respective of the efforts and the cooperation and coordination that's going on with regards to sage grouse. There's also a model that's coming out, a guideline for interaction between sheep, domestics and wild, and it's referred to as it's based on risk of contact. And I guess it's maybe in a way that's always where it's been or where it's been headed, but to recognize it as a risk of contact model so that it kind of alleviates some of the concerns from ranchers and that it's an all-out attack on grazing and that side of things, that it's more of an evaluation of risk. What are the risks to having sheep here and managing those risks? And I can tell you, in the industry that I'm in with food safety, that's what we base a lot of our business on. And the model makes a lot of sense to me, and it sounds like that there'll be some coordination between BLM and WAFWA, and that there'll be some documents that come out on that sooner than later. And I thought that was of interest. During our commissioners committee meeting, we had a presentation. We generally have a presentation or two, and there was one real simple statement that was made that really resonated with me, and it basically was agencies will transform, but under what terms? That's really what's on the table here, and it has to do with this dealing with multiple constituencies and finding balance and funding and all that other stuff. So it really did drive home the question for me. We've been talking about it all morning with this tracking point. Are we going to take care of fair chase issues? Are we going to pursue funding opportunities? What are we going to do? Or are we just going to let that kind of stuff happen to us? And so I like the fact that we're talking about these things. It gives us an opportunity to help with the transformations that we're probably going to go through whether we want to or not. And that kind of helps us shape what we look like when everything's said and done. There were some numbers that were thrown out having to do with recruitment, with sportsman recruitment, and there's an interesting dynamic that's occurring, and I've kind of brought it up before. We've had conversations about the traditional funding source, the threats to it because of attrition. As older folks get to a certain age, they drop off, and there's not enough replacing them to fund these agencies. And what it boils down to is that there's always this debate about the 2%, the 1%. Well, from a sportsman's number, we see in some of the stuff that's brought forward how we see that we're seeing this increase in the number of sportsmen that are being recruited and that are into the sport. And that's true. There is an increase. But where it's different is that per capita, that number is going down. So you have this weird dynamic, and it gives everybody these levels of comfort with their argument. Hunting is headed downward in terms of numbers. That's not true from just a raw number standpoint. The number of people involved in hunting continues to climb, but per capita, that it's not. That number is going down, and what it means is that there's going to be funding challenges. That those numbers aren't growing at a rate that's going to help fund. So it starts this whole conversation about alternate funding, and that's the last thing that I wanted to kind of touch base on. I've talked about this blue ribbon panel that WAFWA has been kind of on the edges with, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, which is kind of the national level. They have been leading the charge on looking into a funding mechanisms for agencies moving forward. And originally, I think that there was a real focus on excise tax, similar to what we have with the Pittman-Robertson, Dingell-Johnson, Willett-Borough, those types of things. But it would be more designed for non-sportsman type of approach. It would be for the bird watchers and the recreationalists, the hikers, that kind of stuff. And that didn't look like there were a lot of opportunities. The panel that has been working on that decided that the excise tax was kind of might not be a winner. It might create more problems than solve. So they started to look into royalties, existing royalties, and they have a number of big oil companies involved in this process, and they've actually kind of led the way here a little bit. And it appears that there's about $12.3 billion worth of unappropriated royalties, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it. And their thought is real simple. Might not be easy to get there, but is just to tap into 10% of that. And what that means is that there'd be roughly $1.3 billion that would go back into Pittman-Robertson, basically. Kind of, I guess, Tony, that would be like just another section of Pittman-Robertson, I guess. And for Nevada, I think Tony scratched out on a piece of paper to give you an idea of what that would mean to Nevada, is that the funding mechanism, the funding would roughly go from about a $39 million a year budget to roughly a $60 million. So it's a very significant chunk of money for here in Nevada. And anyway, so where it's at is that this panel is actually looking at to find if there's champions in Congress that are willing to take it up. And there's indications that there are. I think that there is some broad support. It's got all the horsepower behind it in the right places to make something happen. It would take several years for it to move forward if it were going to. But what it does is it provides a broader funding base. And the good news for people that are concerned that in theory the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation is in support of this. So some of those concerns, on what it means in a broad sense have been addressed enough to where the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation has basically said, you know what, we can take the next step here and see what we've got. We're not threatened by it in that sense, and so I think that you're going to see this thing move down the road. And I think that was about, those are probably the updates that I have. So,
Questions for Commissioner McNinch before we move on? Seeing none. Commissioner Hubbs.
I was following you up until the royalties. I didn't quite understand what you were referring to. Can you clarify?
yeah, I think what's happening is that these there's royalties, and I think they're from oil and gas, and they basically go into a big pot of money. And I imagine that because they're unappropriated, they just kind of get spent. You know, people stick their hand in the cookie jar, pull some money out, you know, on projects or whatever. And I think the intent here is that rather than allow that to happen to $12.3 billion, allow it to happen to like to $10 billion instead, and see if you can get about 10% of that appropriated to a consistent cause through Pittman Robertson, which is the grants that we were just talking about, the matching fund type stuff. So it could create some real significant challenges to Nevada in the sense that you've got to be able to match that money. And, you know, I know that there are states out there that New Jersey, I think, and the New Jersey director, Tony's equivalent in New Jersey, I believe that in New Jersey, they have a state law that requires them to, the legislature to match, to provide all the necessary money to maximize the match. And you know, we had a similar discussion here in Nevada one time, but it didn't go anywhere. We got a hearing, but we didn't get it. It didn't move anywhere. But it was just introduced the concept of it. So that money would go into PR, and then there would, you know, you'd have to, depending on how much you could match, your funding would, go that way. So.
And Commissioner McNinch, was that or Director Wadsley, either one, is that a one-time allocation or that's an annual?
It'd be annual.
Yo. That's a lot of money. All right. Additional questions for Commissioner McNinch? Commissioner Wallace, was this your first WAFA?
Yes.
So you are a rookie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Commissioner McNinch covered a lot of the nuts and bolts on it, and I just kind of wanted to relay the experience. And it was great meeting commissioners from other states. In fact, of the 16 western states in WAFA, 11 of the states had commissioners representing. Some states actually had their entire commission representing. Some only had one, but I believe, what was it, Arizona had 4. It was all 5 there. And then South Dakota had 2 or 3. And it was kind of get your feet on the ground, and it's one of those things. I understand why Commissioner McNinch goes every time, because he's built these relationships with commissioners, and everywhere we went, he's like introducing you to them, and we're trying to remember names and things like that. And I really enjoyed on the Friday for the commissioners meeting. I really enjoyed. I mean, we started the day with going around with each state, and they gave us, what was it, 20 minutes? 20 minutes to kind of go over the last year of events that happened in our state, and discussion back and forth. And I tried taking a bunch of notes on each of the states, and some of the things that really, one of the things that stuck out to me, sheep are really big in Nevada, and South Dakota was pretty excited that they had 300 now, and they were issuing 3 tags, 2 draw and 1 auction tag, and they were pretty excited about that. And then another, in New Mexico, actually, one of the interesting things they've been doing with their black bears is they're using DNA from the hair caught in fences to help them estimate their bear population. And I thought that was kind of like to have heard more about that, but that was just kind of a quick in their summary of what had been going on in their state. And they were actually talking about they were trying to increase their lion and bear tags 20%. And then, let's see. Washington had an interesting program that they were trying to implement of a youth commissioner. And they'd started it a couple of years ago, and it kind of got lost in the weeds. And the commissioner that was there was pretty interested in bringing that forward so that they could get the youth involved. And he really didn't go into too much detail on how much say they had, but it was it sounded like it was a pretty good deal to get the youth involved and see how the whole process works. And then let's see what other ones. It was just a lot of discussion back and forth of different things that we had in common, but at the same time they weren't in common. How they dealt with bear issues, mountain lion issues. Wyoming had an interesting on chronic wasting disease. They had some animals that were vaccinated, and they said they were actually more susceptible to the disease after the vaccination than before, which I found very, very interesting. And then Montana, of course, the grizzly bear delisting was the big item for them. And I think that was about it for the state updates. But then they had a human dimensions. Was it Chase Lauren? Was that his name? Lauren Chase. And he did a pretty good presentation. And in fact, I was speaking with Chairman Drew. I think it would be good if we could get Nevada to bring him in for a commission meeting to do a presentation, and where we could go a little more in depth, because he had quite a few of the states where he had taken their license info and had it on a kind of a chart. It's hard to describe without actually seeing it, but it would show the retention of people that buy a hunting license every year and how long it hangs in there versus in Nevada. You could clearly see the youth hunt was right there, and then after the youth hunt, they kind of dropped off significantly. Actually, not kind of, but they dropped off significantly. And I think that would be very beneficial to the commission and to the public and the cabs to actually see that and hear the discussion on that. And other than that, I think Commissioner McNinch covered pretty much everything.
Any questions of Commissioner Wallace? Seeing none. Director Wasley?
Thank you, Chairman Drew. Vice Chairman Wallace, I just want to let you know that Lauren Chase & Chase Consulting is currently under contract with Nevada Department of Wildlife and is assisting us with our fee simplification process, and we'll be doing some focus groups. So some cabs or commissioners or other interested publics may be hearing about these focus groups, but at some point in the not too distant future, we definitely plan on having him come before the full commission and sharing some of what he's learned about our data. Just by way of background, WAFWA has been around since 1922. Have 2 annual meetings. It's comprised of 23 member states and provinces. They have 2 annual meetings. They have the summer meeting, which is usually the more well-attended, larger meeting, usually in excess of 300 people. More committee meetings, longer duration. And then they have the midwinter meeting, which is early January, which is typically 4 days with some other meetings maybe wrapped around that, with typically more in the neighborhood of 100 attendees. It's more specific to directors and commissioners and isn't as involved as the summer meeting. So I just wanted to go through, certainly Dave and Grant, Commissioners McNinch and Wallace, covered a lot of the meetings they were in. I just kind of wanted to give a quick overview of some of the other meetings that occurred. It is a really meeting-rich environment, and as I look at WAFWA and the values to the agency, there's a great opportunity for professional development as we learn what our peers in other states are doing, the challenges and possible solutions that they're facing. So it provides us a great opportunity for interaction to share resources, share science, but it also allows us the opportunity to develop a unified front when we're, interacting with our federal partners. And so we have all the federal agencies present. There were folks from the Department of Interior, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, National Park Service. So all of our federal partners that whether it's wild horse and burros, listings, whatever the issues are, we have an opportunity to interact at pretty high levels, and we can do so as states with a unified front and have a little bit stronger voice than if we're 23 member states and provinces scattered around the landscape. So just real quick, a couple of the meetings and a couple topics. Just the day prior to the meeting, the WAFWA states had a hatchery coordination meeting. It was an all-day event that gave the states an opportunity to discuss the hatchery programs and where they were headed. Again, technology, issues with the feds, for example, quagga mussels, and what do we do in these hatcheries? How do we move fish? What are some of the challenges, disease, etc.? Colorado River Fish and Wildlife Council meeting, that too is an all-day meeting. That includes the states in the Colorado River drainage system. So it's Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and California. Deal with a lot of the issues consistent to the Colorado River system, Animas rivers, toxic spill, AIS, how we're handling quagga mussels in each of the states. Again, looking at programs. Ad hoc sage grouse mitigation strategy meeting. This was an invitation-only meeting, a meeting organized by Interior. We're able to share challenges and opportunities in states, look for solutions. Sage grouse executive oversight committee also contained a section on sage grouse mitigation. The Archery Trade Association, there are some national, some industry reps. The Archery Trade Association, also known as ATA, was there and making the states aware of some of their attempted rule changes. To Pittman Robertson, where the Archery Trade Association is currently trying to adjust the PR bill so that some of those federal funds can actually be spent in recruiting, basically education and outreach, where historically that's been kind of a gray area at best. But they're trying to open that up so that some of those federal funds can be used to recruit. Developing new and alternative funding for wildlife management. Commissioner McNitch spoke to this a little bit. The Blue Ribbon Panel is the AFWA process that Commissioner McNitch spoke to. Would be very similar to the PR. The actual amount of match is yet to it's undetermined, and the hypothetical calculations at this point would take us from less than $1 million a year through the state wildlife grant programs to over $20 million a year, and that would be a continuous, an annual thing. It wouldn't be a one-time thing. So that would obviously create some challenges in generating the match, but I think they'd be welcome challenges. Dave Chanda, the director from New Jersey, who's the current president of AFWA, talked about some of the current emergency policy issues. A lot of the current policy issues facing WAFWA and AFWA have to do with the Endangered Species Act, opportunities to formalize the state's role and improve coordination with the states and try to take away some of the frivolous aspects of some of the listing petitions. A couple other things really quick. One of the challenges that we all face is kind of a workforce in transition. So Director from Wyoming, Scott Talbot, led a discussion on a look at future challenges with retirements and bringing new generations into the workforce. And it was interesting to hear the challenges that many of the Western wildlife agencies face are very similar. I suppose that's not surprising, but certainly some challenges. And then lastly, last September at the AFWA meeting, the association, the National Association meeting, I was having a discussion with Alexa Sandoval, the director from New Mexico, and we were comparing some of the challenges we have in managing bears and nuisance bears in particular. They've had 5 encounters. I guess they may refer to them as attacks, but they've had 5 contact situations with bears, and we talked about a desire to have a consistent approach in dealing with nuisance animals. We talked about the value in using WAFWA to develop some consistent protocols, whether those are specific to euthanasia, whether they're specific to nuisance wildlife, or broaden those out to include coyotes and lions as well, is yet to be determined. But both the Western Association has a human wildlife conflict committee, as well as the National Association has a similar committee. And so we are currently developing kind of a scope of work, and we're going to take that to those committees to see if we can't develop some consistent protocols in how we handle some nuisance wildlife and euthanasia. Again, taking advantage of the opportunity to share knowledge, experience, and developing a unified front in that regard. And that's all I have on my update, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Director Wasley? Okay. Hearing none, I'll close agenda 10C.